Díobh gach duine fáilte as go dtí chlór an seo an Cluiche. Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode here on Cluiche. It's another episode of Social Media Reacts. It is episode 10 of the series that I started in 2024 on this channel. So of course, if you were there at the very first episode of Social Media Reacts or one of the previous episodes, you'll have noticed that one episode I had 20 something tweets, the next episode I had 8 or something. And it just more or less depended on how busy the week was. So I decided I'm going to bring a bit of structure to Social Media Reacts. We're going to do 10 tweets every week. 10 tweets that, in the best of our ability, covered all the games from the weekend. And once we cover them, of course, we can dive right back in to talking about the weekend's action in general. So I'm trying to cover the tweets from the biggest personalities in Gaelic games across Twitter, everything that they were saying about the weekend's action. Of course, this series is brought to you by Capture Athletics. If you need any athletic wear, any sports wear, do be sure to check out the guys over at Capture Athletics. Thanks very much to the lads for sponsoring this video. So, of course, over the weekend, we had some teams condemned to the Hurling Cup. Kildare down. Like, some big fish are in the Hurling Cup this year, but we also now know who is in the Sam Maguire Cup. So the tweet here from Kieran McCarthy says the group stage draw for the Sam Maguire Cup takes place on Tuesday, live on GA.ie, with Cork as 4th seeds. What's the best and worst case scenario for the Rebels? So obviously he's asking that from a Cork standpoint, but as you can see there, the first seeds, Galway or Mayo, whoever wins the Connacht final, Clare or Kerry, whoever wins the Munster final, Dublin or Louth, whoever wins the Leinster final, and Armagh and Donegal, whoever wins the Ulster final. Whoever loses those finals then will be the 2nd seed, and then the 3rd seeds are Derry, Tyrone, Roscommon and Monaghan, and the 4th seeds are Cavan, Cork, Meath and Westmeath. So let's actually dive into it there with Kieran's tweet. If I was Cork right in this particular moment, definitely I would want to avoid Derry and Tyrone in the 3rd seed group. I would see the Roscommon game as being probably the most winnable, especially given that Cork actually beat Roscommon in last year's championship. Out of the 2nd seeds, you'd be hoping potentially probably for Louth from a Cork standpoint, given that Cork, of course, played against Louth in Division 2. I think that's the most winnable game out of whoever, or maybe if Clare were to lose to Kerry, that's also a winnable game for Cork. And then out of the 1st seeds, whoever is going to most likely win the provincial championships, I think Cork would be best off against probably Galway or Mayo, because obviously they beat Mayo last year. I think their confidence would certainly be up heading into that game. So for me, that's the best case scenario for Cork, is that they get Roscommon, Louth or Clare, and Galway or Mayo in their group. The worst case scenario, obviously, is that they get Derry out of the 3rd seeds, someone like Donegal or Armagh from the 2nd seeds, and then Dublin, I would say, or Kerry from the 1st seeds group. So definitely that will be an interesting one to pay attention to see how the group stages shape up, and it will give you a good indication of who is likely to go far in the championship. Now, obviously, there were some big football games over the weekend. We had the 2 Ulster semi-finals and the 2 Leinster football semi-finals as well. And Colin Parkinson weighed in here on the Ulster semi-finals. He says, fairly depressing that McGuinness spent 10 years travelling the world in different professional soccer setups and came back putting 15 men inside the 45. Even Gallen and McBrearty back. F me. I mean, that is fairly, like, he's definitely nailing his colours to the mast in terms of what his opinions are on McGuinness's tactics in that game. Look, he has lined up defensive in some games, but he has lined up extremely attacking in other games. He's brought variation to his game. I think McGuinness is not just a defensive-based coach. I think he also is a counter-attacking based coach, and I think he absolutely worked Derry out in the opening game, and that wasn't a defensive masterclass. They just pushed right up on Oran Lynch's kickouts. I mean, something that a lot of teams probably should have been doing a long time ago. Conan Doherty here says Armagh took over 3 minutes off the clock to get the last score. Down, I'm assuming he means Down had 1 minute to go and we knew it was over. Good from those teams, but how easy it is to keep the ball is the biggest crisis in Gaelic football. No other sport lets it happen. I absolutely agree with Conan Doherty. Conan Doherty, for me, pound for pound, is one of the best pundits out there to listen to. That guy knows his stuff. And him talking about the keeping the ball stuff, it's the most apparent for me in the Leinster Championship with Dublin, that if anybody scores a goal against Dublin, Dublin are just like, okay, that's cute. We'll keep the ball for the next 10 minutes and you're not going to get it back. And it just kills any momentum that the other team can build up. Because, you know, back in the day, back in the 2000s, you would get a goal and the goalkeeper would respond by belting it out into the midfield, and then you might win the next kick out, and then you might go on an attack again. Now, if you get a goal against one of the big teams, they kick it out short and they hold on to the ball for 2 minutes and just kill your momentum dead unless you can turn the ball over. So personally, I think the GA should really seriously start looking at some sort of a shot clock, or some sort of an emphasis on getting teams to push further and further up the pitch. Like something like the basketball rule where once you go inside the opposition's half, you're not allowed to go back inside your own, a 2-minute shot clock or something like that, that guarantees that we are in a state of attack. And I think if we did that, I think the game might naturally start to go back towards what it was like in the 2000s, where we actually did have a cornerback and corner forward battling it out for the ball every 5 seconds. Like it felt like when you watched the Dublin Mayo game in 2006, that was box office. It didn't have as much scores, but it was more entertaining. No question about it. And speaking of entertaining, I mean, the Leinster Championship hasn't been entertaining for almost 2 decades now. Aaron here as well says, my good friend Aaron Prendergast, obviously the man behind Gaelic Games Fan TV, who's obviously on Sports Joe as well. Big shout out to Aaron, absolutely smashing it. But he was at the Dublin Offaly game in the Hill. He says, Croke Park waits in anticipation for the Leinster semi-final between Dublin and Offaly. I reckon Dublin might win this. Like, the atmosphere at Leinster games now is just really weird. You're in a massive stadium. Like, I'll put it in perspective like this. The last time Dublin played Offaly was in the 2006 Leinster football final. There were 82,300 people at that game. It's just absolutely extraordinary to see how we've gone from a completely full house, sold out, to everybody knows what's going to happen. And that's the thing, is that jeopardy and not being sure the result is what draws the fans. Where there's debate, you're doing something right. If you know what's going to happen, you're less likely to want to go. We all know what's going to happen. Dublin are going to smoke everyone in Leinster. It's been the way that it's been for the last decade. It's not going to change anytime soon. Like, mark my words, Meath have been in a constant state of, over the last decade, of one step forward, one step back. They find a player, they lose a player. Kildare are worse than I've ever seen them. And while Louth are doing great, it still took Louth, 3 years of absolutely smashing it to beat Kildare, who, as I said, are in the worst position I've ever seen them in. And Louth still didn't hammer Kildare. So how are they going to beat Dublin? And then you got Westmeath, who, the minute you get behind them and the minute you start to think, okay, we're making progress here, they have a performance like the Wicklow game where they lose to a side that's been relegated to Division 4. So I think the other key stat to look at is, apart from Dublin, it's not just Dublin's fault. Dublin have got so much better, but everybody else has got so much worse. Like at the start of the Leinster in the 2000s, Westmeath won it in 2004, Laois won it in 2003, Offaly won it in 1998, Kildare won it in 2000, Meath won it in 2001, and Dublin won it in 2002. Wexford should have won it in 2011 and 2012. Louth should have won it in 2010. It's only like over the last decade that the Leinster Championship has just gone so boring because it's so predictable. We all know what's going to happen. If a movie came out and you were going to the cinema and I told you exactly what was going to happen at the end, you wouldn't go, because you know what's going to happen. So I think Leinster need to seriously look at it. If Meath and Kildare would suddenly get good overnight, I think the crowds would be back, because that's what was drawn in the 2000s. I remember being a kid going to Dublin Meath in 2007, and it felt massive because the stadium was sold out. So it's a huge problem. But the stat that I was saying, as well as Dublin getting so good, is no Leinster team other than Dublin has stayed in Division 1 since 2013. So it's not just Dublin's fault. It's not like Meath are out here, making pushes to the All-Ireland semi-final or final. They're nowhere near it. Neither are Kildare, neither are Louth, neither are Westmeath, neither are Offaly. So it's not just our fault. Other teams have completely dropped the ball as well. And that's why the Leinster Championship has been in the state that it is currently in. 21,000 people for a Leinster semi-final doubleheader is not good at all. Moving on then, Conor McKenna here is talking about the hurling. So he said, Cork hurlers have won one of their last 7 championship matches. The matches they have lost have been by 1 score or less. 5 matches, an average losing margin of 1.6 points. Cork have been very unlucky in some ways and could easily have won most or all of those games. And that's the thing, I was talking about it with Matthew, and I was saying, when you put it, with facts like that, it can look a bit bleak. But when you look at it, Cork are so close. The amount of times they've lost by a point or 2 points or a last minute goal or anything like that. They lost to Clare last year by a point. They lost to Clare yesterday by 2 points. They've pushed Limerick all the way. They've pushed Tip all the way and lost. Like, they drew a Tip last year. It's just insane that they haven't got that little bit of the rub of the green, but hopefully it can come from them, because personally they're one of my favourite teams. Like, the pace and the attacking intent that they have in the team is a joy to watch. Of course, it was massive results. Like, Antrim beating Wexford was absolutely sensational. That's the standout result in the hurling. What an outstanding win for Darren Gleeson's men. And then going back to McKenna, he talks about Tipperary here. He says Tipperary have won one of their last 10 matches in the Munster Championship. Today was Tipperary's heaviest championship defeat in 12 years. And I mean, that's the thing, is that, look, Cork and Clare played out an epic. Waterford and Cork the week previous. All these games are tight games. Tipperary got slapped up by Limerick in the opening game, and now they're in a position where their backs are really against the wall. Like, and I don't know. It's one of those performances that performance was so bad that I don't see Tipperary getting out of the Munster Championship now. I genuinely at the start was saying Clare top, Limerick second, Cork third. I thought that was how it would go. I still think those three might get out, but now that Waterford have won, I would back Waterford to probably beat Tipperary in this moment in time. And if they do, I wouldn't be surprised at all if Waterford got out, which would be a huge achievement for Davy Fitz. Going back to the Cork-Clare game here, Crackety Ash says, Hoggy, the old dog for the hard road, classic Patrick Horgan finesse. I mean, if you haven't seen that goal, it was absolutely sensational from Patrick Horgan, just rolling back the ears, absolutely outstanding chip, just a bit of genius from him. But then obviously there was the red card as well. So Buff Egan, interestingly enough, obviously a Clare man, he says never a red card, talking about the Sean O'Donoghue red card. Sean Sheehan then retweeted it, said Clare constantly at this, run into a lad and dive like Luis Suarez. Shane Maguire as good as Shane O'Donnell resorts to guff like this. Same with Hegarty last year. Clare clearly target people and tried to get them sent off. Hurling can't have this, needs to be retroactive action. I'm assuming that the next bit is taken there. I think every team is at it. I wouldn't be, throwing at Clare and saying they're the only teams that do it. I'd say every team has an element of the dark arts in them. And Matthew Hurley, who's as passionate a Cork man as ever, like he was saying, it probably was a red card. My thing is, if you throw a swipe, you're off. I don't care if the player makes a meal out of it. If you throw a swipe, if it's a striking offence, you are gone. That has been the rules in Gaelic football for decades. Get with the programme. Don't swing at someone. Off you go if you do. Simple as that for me. Then this as well from Colin Parkinson. He says, Kevin getting the priorities right. The children's autographs as important as the interview. Of course, that's Kevin MacDonald there, one of the captains of the Carlow hurling team. And he, of course, signing the autographs for the Carlow kids. That is fantastic to see. Carlow, of course, came so close to beating Dublin in the opening round, which would have been a massive result, along with the Antrim win over Wexford. Just before we wrap up, I want to wish the best to Peter Casey. Obviously, Limerick GA said all at Limerick GA would like to wish Peter Casey a speedy recovery. Looking forward to seeing Peter back on the field of play as soon as possible. And yeah, that was a horror injury for Peter Casey, and for a hurler so talented that, like, when Peter's at his best, there's very few people in the country who can compare to him. He's absolutely extraordinary, real flair player, but a player that you pay in to watch. So I pray that he is okay. Well, my best wishes go out to him. Peter, if you somehow see this, my best wishes are with you. I hope that you get back sooner rather than later, because you're the type of player that you would pay into Croke Park just to watch strut stuff. So yeah, that is episode number 10 of Social Media Reacts here, guys. Brought to you by Capture Athletics. My name is Seamus Brady. Thank you for joining me on this episode. Until the next one, on Cluiche, guys. Torara.